The Forked Ways. The paths of the world twist and turn. They divide and converge, taking you to unexpected places. The tale you are about to hear is a Southern Gothic ghost story. It is also a gay romance. Week by week, the chapters will unfold, taking you to the haunted town of Assembly and the strange lands around it. When We Were Gone Astray is the second book of The Forked Ways. Late summer has given way to autumn, and Halloween is approaching. The days are growing shorter and the nights are chill. So put another log on the fire. Find a comfortable chair. Sit back. Relax. Listen. When we were gone astray. Children we are, children we shall be, till our mother the earth hath fed upon our bones. Robert Louis Stevenson. Prayers written at Failima. November. "What could it be?" Fletch asked. "Looks like a rat to me," Fletch suggested. "A rat? It's bigger than any rat I've ever seen." He frowned. "Maybe it's some kind of foreign critter." "I can smell a rat when I sees one," Fletch insisted. In the hall at the end of the world. The air is chill. A gust of wind stirs the fallen leaves. It drifts through the forest, offering breath to the dead who lie restless in the earth. The wind wakes memories in the old bones, but most of them resist. They lie still or shudder more deeply into decay. Only rarely will the bones press up through the earth, disturbing beetles and fragile roots, reaching skeletal fingers toward the wind and its promise of breath and life. The wind bends the tall grass in the clearing, skims the cold lake, seeps through cracks in the walls of the forest hall. While we sleep, wrapped in our blanket of stars, it chills our ears with a soft whisper. "Wake, wake, the way is dark, the graves are open, and the dead rise." Chapter 1. October. "Is anyone there?" Fletch called. He lifted the lantern, trying to see into the darkness among the trees, but no one responded or appeared. The beginning of the trail stretched empty before him, its climbing curve still visible in the autumn dusk. Beyond an encroachment of pine saplings and blackberry brambles, the woods on either side could scarcely be discerned. High above, the tops of the pines caught the evening wind and whispered. Fletch had grown to love the woods at night, especially the main paths when they were lit by moonlight. He looked back toward the lighted porch, wondering if he should wait for Silver, but if someone was there, it might be better to go on ahead. Lines from a poem he had read at school echoed to the beat of his footsteps. "It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year." Though he heard no sound, he was aware of a presence beside him. He turned and saw Silver with no light of any kind. How was he able to move like that, so swiftly and so silently? "That was quick," Fletch said. "I was right behind you." "I didn't see anyone. Are you sure someone was out here?" Silver nodded, his pale hair shimmering in the lantern light. "Pretty sure. A tall man, wearing a hat." Silver's words sparked a memory in Fletch, a dream conversation with the wicked old wolf just before dawn. The wolf had taken its human form, a man in a long coat and broad-brimmed hat. Fletch could smell the smoke whispering from the man's cigarette. "I keep wondering how you fit in," the man said. "How did it rip free of me and come to you? You're not the one with the knives." "Blood," Fletch told him. "It came from Cotton's blood." The man's lips thinned into a smile. "Yes, but you're not the one bleeding. Not yet." As the dream faded, Fletch awoke to the memory of a trickle of blood from Silver's open hands. "It's not me," Fletch whispered. "It's not me, Dad. It's Silver." And that was what he had told his father after breakfast, as they waited on the porch for Silver's truck. His gaze kept following the long dirt driveway that stretched from the pastorium to the highway, and to the little church with its set of bright red doors. "It's a relic," Mark said. "The Friends of God have a venerable history, but there are good reasons we've never become anything more than a backwater cult. And the big reason isn't even that our beliefs were considered heretical. It's that we persisted in crucifying people, usually young people." Fletch moved the porch rocker back and forth as his father spoke. He felt afraid, torn. His father lived in one world, Betsy lived in another, and he felt as if he and Silver were caught between them. "You still see such things, sometimes, in primitive societies," Mark continued. "People endure intense pain, even mutilate themselves. It's considered part of their devotion. My guess is you could probably trace it back to prehistoric sacrificial rituals, but Christianity has moved beyond that. I don't mean to sound ethnocentric, Fletch, but there's something to be said for civilization." Fletch nodded. He looked at the smooth brown skin of the back of his hand resting on the arm of the rocking chair. "I'm not arguing with you, Dad. It scares me too." He leaned back and closed his eyes. "It makes me feel sick thinking about it. But Betsy sees it differently, I guess because she's been through it." "It's true she can do remarkable things," Mark admitted. "I've talked with Doc Merritt about that. He thinks there's some kind of change that happens to certain people chemically when they endure intense fear or suffering. It reconfigures their neural pathways. Could be it heightens their mental abilities and perceptions, but it isn't supernatural, and if you ask me, it isn't worth the cost." He shook his head. "Crucifixion isn't a nice thing, Fletch. It's violent and very ugly." Mark stood up, wincing at the pain in his knees, and went to the porch railing. "They had one of those things up at Ocala 10 years back. The woman was in her 20s. That doesn't make it okay, but at least she was an adult. Silver's barely 16. "How far back does it go? How many years?" Fletch asked. "Certainly as far back as the Middle Ages. It's supposed to go back to New Testament times, though I'm skeptical about that. None of the credible references are older than the 13th century. According to that tradition, the first of the Paracletes wrote the Gospel of John." Mark sighed. "It isn't true, of course, but even if it were, there's no reason we should perpetuate the practice." Fletch looked at him, troubled and sorrowful. "But it's going to happen, Dad. Silver's going to go through with it." His father nodded wearily. "I know." Fletch heard the approaching roar of Silver's truck, and he picked up his book bag. He paused beside his father at the porch steps. "Dad, don't worry too much, okay? I'm going to be all right, whatever happens." Mark smiled. "I don't doubt it. You're a remarkable person, Fletch, and I love you very much." Fletch grinned. He jumped from the porch and ran to the truck. The passenger door swung open, and he climbed inside. How are your hands?" Silver showed him his palms. "They don't hurt this morning. There aren't even any marks, but I had to wrap them in a towel last night." "Dad says they're like the stigmata, like saints get in the Catholic Church." "Well," said Silver, "that's one thing I'm not." He took Fletch by the hand, pulled him across the seat, and kissed his ear. "Yikes, my dad will see us." "I don't care. Besides, you're the one who started this." He put the truck in gear and pulled onto the highway. "Your dad doesn't know?" "He probably suspects, but I've never talked to anyone about it before." He looked away. "I'm not ashamed, but there was never really a reason to bring it up, you know?" "Now there is?" "Now there's you." That had been this morning, and now it was night in the lonesome October. "Do you want to keep going?" Fletch asked him, peering ahead into the darkness. "We've still got a ton of homework to finish." Our homework was lost in the forest, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Silver intoned the words, indicating with a sweep of his arm the forest before them. "I can't get it out of my head either," Fletch admitted. "Nobody but Poe can be so gloomy and so bouncy at the same time." They circled back toward the cemetery and walked between the rows of gravestones. When they reached the new grave, they stopped. "Lonnie Cotton Wills, rest in peace." "Dwight's been acting odd," said Silver. Odder. He's avoiding me. I wonder if he knows about Cotton and the wolf. Do you think he was helping his father out in the swamp?" "I don't know," Fletch admitted. "I hate the thought of going out there again, but maybe we ought to." For a moment, he felt the weight of Cotton's loneliness. It seemed inseparable from the chill of October, the odor of damp earth and the whisper of the leaves. He drew close to Silver, reassured by his presence and the clasp of his hand. The world was changing around him, yet he still sometimes woke in the middle of the night, certain that the events of September had been a dream, that Silver himself was only a creature of the night's fancy, who would dissolve in daylight. "I'm glad we're here together," he said. Silver picked a burr from the collar of Fletch's jacket. "How could we be any place else?" Mule Shed. In the weeks since his father's suicide, Dwight's physical wounds had begun to heal. The black eye was gone. The ulcerated cut on the inside of his lower lip had closed over, leaving an oddly shaped lump under the skin. If there were other, deeper wounds, he did not feel them. Eyes were on him, and he had the itch of being watched whenever people passed him in the hall at school. Everyone knew what had happened, or thought they knew. What had really happened was beyond the reach of their imagination. Last night he had awakened to the sound of drunken roaring, doubled over with the pain of a boot driven into his stomach, and then he had realized the house was quiet, and there was no boot, no pain, no father to harm him. He lay in bed, trying to still his ragged breathing. Then he got up and went to the window. Across the dirt road beyond the barbed wire fence, the trees of the forest were black and formless. It took little imagination to people the land with ghosts. The path through the briars lay unconcealed now that autumn had arrived. From the backyard, Dwight could see all the way beyond the chicken house to the weathered gray boards of the mule shed at the wood's edge. There was no need for the path to be a secret any longer. No need for Dwight to keep his collection of books hidden away. His father was dead and no longer cared, and his mother would have been happy to have the books in the house. But the ritual of reading in secret was so ingrained in Dwight that he found the habit difficult to break. Reading on the porch made him feel exposed. Having books in the house still felt unsafe. He had finished the bear story the first week of October and moved on to the next part of Go Down Moses, but he continued to read in the mule shed. The one change Dwight had dared to make since his father's death was to clean out some of the space inside the shed. He had hauled out cardboard boxes filled with old rags, rat poison, and rusty tools. There were rotten canvas chairs from a deer stand down in the swamp, and a wheelless wheelbarrow heaped with trash. A leather yoke still hung from a rafter. At least, he supposed that's what it was, a massive open collar that looked as if it would fit over the neck of a mule. The shed had no electricity, but he had found a barrel-shaped kerosene heater. An air pilot lantern provided sufficient illumination, along with the arrows of light which shot down through holes in the tin roof. Dwight found he liked the place, except for the glass jugs lined up on the sagging shelves. They were so covered in dust and grime that he couldn't tell what they contained. Ancient moonshine, he guessed, probably spoiled. Recently, he had dreamed that one of the jugs was filled with blood, which swirled about restlessly, trying to escape. It was sentient and dangerous, and aware of him. The only thing lacking out here was music. The house was too small to crank it up to the level Dwight desired, and his mother disapproved of Zeppelin and Sabbath anyway. John Bonham's death had happened the same week as his father's, and for Dwight, the deaths were emotionally connected, almost part of the same event. In fact, as near as he could recall, he had played Stairway to Heaven in reverse on the very night Zeppelin's drummer had died. Was that creepy or what? He could run a drop cord from the house, he decided, and plug in a radio or record player. The rest would just take time. Silver Girl. James Murray maid sang my lay, see how still she stands. Susanna Nelms sang the nonsense words to herself as she skipped the rope. Today she was in the covered bridge place, and that always made things more interesting. She wished she were older. At 7, she felt too old for baby things and not yet old enough for big girl things. She hated being shuffled around by her parents, who wanted her to play by herself, but wouldn't allow her to go anywhere interesting without one of them coming along. There were boundaries she was not allowed to cross. She could go to the gate by the bridge, but not onto the bridge itself, because the bridge was part of the street, and streets were dangerous because there were cars, and cars could run you over. She could play by the stream, but not in it, which meant her hands could touch the water, but her feet couldn't. It was silly. They still treated her like a first grader. The street wasn't that dangerous, if you were careful. Besides, there was even a sidewalk. From the gate, she could see up the street to the entrance of her father's office. She could see whether there were cars or no cars. It would take less than a minute to run that far. In fact, her mother let her do it sometimes. If she wanted a drink from the cooler at the barber shop beyond the doctor's office, her mother would give her the money and stand by the gate. Susanna would walk up the street, give the money to 4-by, and return with a knee-high, a grape julep, or a yoo-hoo. 4-by knew about the troll because she had told him, even though she hadn't told her parents. Fletch knew about it too, because she trusted him with things like that. Susanna was no longer sure that the troll lived under the bridge, but at least she spent time there. For a while she had gone away. Now she was back, and Susanna was teaching her to speak. At first, the troll had been sneaky and sly, keeping to the shadows, taking the small gifts Susanna left for her and leaving others in their place, beads and smooth stones, twisty roots and plucked flowers. Susanna continued to leave pieces of candy and bottles of juice, drawings of people, animals, and trees. Every so often she left a memory of something which had frightened her, and the troll responded by teaching her rhymes to say. In the beginning, Susanna had been nervous about having a troll so close by, and she was still a little afraid of her. But the troll wasn't ugly, as she had first thought. She was a pale and beautiful girl, just the age Susanna wanted to be, and her name was Nellie. The boundaries were the same, whether it was a covered bridge day or not, so Susanna kept to them obediently. She followed the steps and paths of the terraced gardens, where her father grew herbs and her mother grew flowers. She went down to the edge of the stream and followed it through cattails and water iris until she came to the stone foundation of the bridge. There, seated on a mossy stone, with one knee drawn up under her chin, Nellie waited, as still and unblinking as a reptile. As Susanna approached, the girl's head turned. Her eyes lost their vacant look and came into focus. She did not smile, but did extend her hand, pointing to the plastic bottle Susanna carried. "Juice?" she said in a voice raspy from disuse. "Chocolate milk," Susanna corrected her. Nellie was so still that only her lips seemed to move. "Good. To drink." Susanna smiled and started to say something else, but Nellie's face had gone blank. She tried to stand, failed, and toppled into the shallow water, unbreathing, her eyes fixed on nothing. Susanna sat down on the mossy rock, opened the chocolate milk, and waited. Nellie often died for a few minutes, but she always came back to life. As was usual on covered bridge days, something peculiar had happened. Susanna had been standing at the gate, looking at the timber side of the bridge, wondering how it could sometimes be there and sometimes not. And as she watched, the old gray pickup belonging to Silver Kindle crossed the covered bridge and stopped at the mill. A girl got out and greeted her. "You aren't Silver," Susanna said in surprise, "but you drive the same truck." The girl tickled her. "I'm not Silver. What color am I?" "Silver," Susanna squeaked. "You're both silver." "What color are you?" "Green. I wish I was green." The girl laughed. "Okie doke. You have my permission to be green just for today." She handed Susanna a bag of apples. "These are for your mama from my mama. Tell her we really liked the bread." "Okay." Susanna waved as the girl got back into the truck and drove away. When We Were Gone Astray is produced by Misty Valley Cooperative. The text and audiobook are copyright 2020 by Beau Farr. All rights reserved.